grew up always with having a keen interest in them. I suppose it comes from my family background. When the seabirds on Rathlin has always been very important to the people that lived in Rathlin. If you go back to my grandfather's time, it would have been part of the staple diet to harvest the seabird eggs for food, and actually some of the birds as well. And then in my father's generation, his younger days, there was a good trade for the eggs. They would have collected the eggs and sold them. So places like bakeries and things would have bought them for actually cooking with and so on. And that trade carried on right up through the Second World War. So it was part of the income of the island, if you like, but it was a harvest. So they would have collected the eggs from different areas on different days, and then came back round and took the eggs in the start off areas and went round again. But they would never have collected the eggs more than twice from any one area. They had great respect for the birds. They always let the birds have the third egg and hatch the chick as normal to keep the population going, because they knew if they just kept on taking the eggs, then eventually there'd be no birds and they would lose that source. But then that trade disappeared, and then there was more awareness of conservation started to creep into things. So my family then became more involved with the conservation side of things, and the early ornithologists came to study the birds and so on, came to them because they had a great knowledge of the birds from working closely with them. So when I was growing up, I was getting the stories of what happened in the olden days, and then the stories of, you shouldn't be touching them, and so on. So that sparked an interest from a very early age, and then, I was always sort of an interest in that type of thing, and eventually an opportunity came along to work with RSPB and actually do the monitoring and so on, and that's how I've got to where I am today. But it is fascinating, you can, no matter how much time you spend with the seabird colony, you're always seeing new things and behaviour, things like that. Every minute things are changing. There's a raven's just come in here now, and he's hunting around to see if he can find an egg. You see how he's chased those kittiwakes off. So the colony changes when things like that, when the predator comes along, then you see this sort of defence starting to happen. You get more birds up flying around to cause confusion. That's quite deliberate. They all fly around, then the raven gets hassled, so he just disappears and he doesn't actually get anything. But they're quite persistent. But the thing is, they've got a family of chicks just around the corner and a nesting ledge to feed also. Yeah, the puffins, obviously they've got these massive big orange webbed feet and 3 little claws on the ends, and the coloured beak. It's a very clown-like expression, this big coloured beak. And because they spend the majority of their life in the ocean, they've sort of evolved to have their feet back, quite far back in their body. So when they come in and stand in the land for the couple of months of the summer when they're in here breeding, they tend to be very top heavy, and they're always trying to keep their balance, and you can see them sometimes like tumbling over. Their claws get tangled in the grass, they fall over and roll down the bank, and then get up and sort of look all around them like as if what happened there. So they're very, very funny to watch. Well, everywhere that there's those big groups of birds are guillemots, yep. And in those ledges and little alcoves and things, all packed in together, thousands of them. They're very sociable. They sort of can put up with each other being packed in tight. Male birds come back earlier in the season to reclaim their territory, because believe it or not, even though they just look as if they're just standing beside each other, every bird has its own territory. They're just the size of itself and the size of where it'll lay its egg. And the males come in the spring to reclaim their territories from the year before, because there's always new young males looking for new territories. So they'll come in the morning, first light, maybe stay for a couple of hours, then go back out again, and they sort of do that throughout the spring, staying longer and longer each day until they come to the time of year for laying the eggs, and then they stay all day. And all these birds you see here will all be sitting on eggs. So their partner's probably out catching fish. And then they come in after feeding themselves, change over in the egg. The other bird goes out and does the same until the egg hatches, and then the two birds start bringing in fish to feed the chick. And when the chick's hatched, because it's a very large egg, just one singular egg, when the chick's hatched, it's reasonably well developed. So approximately 2 weeks after hatching, it's ready to go to sea then with the parents. Because the longer they sit on the cliffs here, the more vulnerable they are to being picked off and eaten by some of the other predator birds that prey on the colony here. And they usually come off the cliffs in the evening and into just about 11 o'clock at night, early July, when it's long daylight hours. The male bird will sit offshore and he calls to the chick, and through all that noise of all these other birds, that chick will recognise the call of its parents. And male bird calls to the chick and encourages to come down, Eventually it picks up enough courage and jumps off. Even off the top, it's still not able to fly properly, it's just half feathered. So they flutter down, bouncing from ledge to ledge. They're quite strong little chaps, and they just bounce their way down, tumbling over the ledges and down into the sea. As soon as they hit the sea, off they go, start swimming out along with the parents. And the idea is to get offshore, and by daylight they're so far offshore that the predators that are around here won't follow them out there. And once they're on the surface of the sea, even at that early age, they're perfect swimmers and divers. So if a gull swoops down to try and pick them off, they just dive underneath and away they go down into the sea. It's quite interesting to stand here in the evening and watch that whole thing happening before encouraging the chick to come down. Interesting to watch how closely bonded the pair are, because you can see how they preen each other's feathers and so attentive to each other, making sure the feathers are all perfect. These birds, when they pair for life, and they stay together through the whole season of the chick rear and chick feeding, out to sea, and then at that point when the chick becomes independent, after about a month or so from leaving the cliffs, the whole family splits up then, and they don't see each other again until the next breeding season, when the male comes in to claim his territory, and then a bit later on in the season the female comes back. She'll come back to the same ledge as last year, and the male will be there already holding the territory for her, and they immediately start seeing them doing the pair bonding of billing, where they tap their bills together and checking each other's feathers and going through this whole ritual of getting to know each other all over again. But it's the same birds coming together again for another breeding season, and they just carry on doing that as long as they're both still surviving.